Member, your speaking time is 20 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I usually listen with great interest to the contributions coming from the member for Mayaro, largely because there are sometimes sensible contributions coming, but today he was unrecognizable, Madam Speaker, and I'll tell you why I say that so boldly. The Honourable Member had the intellectual temerity to stand here today to criticize the Minister of Trade, to say that the Minister was attempting to say that this SCZ would modernize and have economic revolution type factors on the economic frontier, and effectively then entered into pleading a case to say that the government was dragged, kicking and screaming, to use his words, to this point, largely because of the government tardiness in treating with the global forum issue. The Honourable Member said that the government was sluggish, that the EU has blacklisted the country for 5 years. And Madam Speaker, why I take offence to the contributions coming from the Honourable Member for Mayaro is because the Honourable Member failed to tell the truth. And the truth, Madam Speaker, is that whilst today this bill, in all of its sections and in all of the clauses in the respective parts, is intended to treat with action item 5 of the European Union mandatory actions to treat with the countering of harmful tax practices, the Honourable Member did not have the intellectual courage to explain why we are where we are, and did not recognize the role and the dereliction of duty in the UNC taking us to where we are. And let me put it on record again, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I can say with confidence, as I said on the 2nd of February 2020 in the House of Representatives on the Hansard that day, that it was a commitment of this government to achieve what is today the bill before us, because the European Union requires the base erosion profit sharing action item 5, which this bill addresses, on account of a commitment to the Global Forum. That commitment to the Global Forum was made by the member for Siparia in 2011. In 2013, common reporting standards were published by the European Union. In 2014, Minister of Finance, then Larry Hawaii, traveled all the way to Berlin in Germany to commit Trinidad and Tobago to comply with satisfaction of all aspects of the Global Forum, which this bill is a part of, by 2017. Worse yet, in September 2015, if my memory serves me well, in treating with the requirements for this bill, Madam Speaker, the member for Siparia, before the election, in that early month of September, committed Trinidad and Tobago to pass 13 double taxation relief treaties, the multilateral convention to treat with mutual administration and assessment of tax matters, the income tax amendment provisions, and to sign that treaty in a 12-month period. Enter the UNC and enter the dishonesty that was put on the record today, Madam Speaker, because the member from Mayaro deceived this Parliament willfully in failing
to withdraw that and find another way.
I'll find another way. I withdraw.
Yes.
Madam Speaker, the member willfully, knowingly, plainly failed to tell the Parliament that the 3 bills which are precursors to the law to allow for us to do this legislation today are the Tax Information Exchange Act, the amendments to the Income Tax Act, and the Multilateral Convention on Mutual Administration, Assessment in Tax Matters. And those 3 bills were sabotaged in Joint Select Committee for a period of 2 parliamentary sessions, such that the government had to spend 2 sessions of the parliament in literally begging the UNC to pass the law. It was only on the 2nd of February 2020 that we were able to pass the law. And let me put it on record. In one of those bills directly related to this act that we seek to cause today by this bill, the only thing that changed was a semicolon, Madam Speaker. So, Madam Speaker, to listen to the UNC representatives, the opposition, come here today and say that the Minister of Trade is misleading the Parliament and is slothful and is somehow not producing the best work, Madam Speaker, I take great offense that the truth has not been told today, Madam Speaker. And I say shame on you, Member for Mayaro, for doing as you have today. Quite respectfully, Madam Speaker. So let's get to this law. I've had the pleasure of drafting this law as Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs. I can say, Madam Speaker, that this particular bill, which is a long bill comprising several parts, comprising 90 sections to be borne by clauses here today, and 5 schedules, this is intended to repeal the Free Zones legislation. The Free Zones legislation, which is the Trinidad and Tobago Free Zones Act, Chapter 8107, is not only archaic, but it was left on the books of Trinidad and Tobago by the members opposite without amendment, Madam Speaker, save for 2 minor amendments in 2011 and then in 2013. Madam Speaker, under the Free Zones legislation, there was effectively a substantial tax holiday carve-out. And worse yet, Madam Speaker, there was no provision for effective periodic renewal and considerations of licenses. There was no reflection upon anti-money laundering and countering terrorist financing. Those permissions granted under the Free Zones legislation were indefinite. They were in fact infinite. There was no period of license, and license continued without ability for effective cessation unless you repeal the legislation or the license is handed back. Madam Speaker, what is this law put quite simply about? You will notice, Madam Speaker, in several of the sections of the bill that you're looking at a few factors. One of them that is extremely important to be found in the definitional section in Section 3. And if you look, Madam Speaker, to sections 35, 36, 39, if you look to 35 and 36 as they touch and concern anti-money laundering and countering financing of terrorism, if you look, Madam Speaker, to the provisions of what is required in terms of a licensee, be it a special economic license that is being granted, or a single economic license, or an operator's license. There are 3 types of licenses. You have to have, in the special licenses and the single licenses, Madam Speaker, you have to have a substantial connection to matters of core income generating activities. You have to satisfy an economic substance test, and you'll find that at clauses 49, in particular in subsections 4 and 5. And what is that, Madam Speaker? That is to treat with making sure that you don't have shell companies abusing taxation privileges where there is no real economic activity in those operations. And permit me, Madam Speaker, to give you the example of Apple Inc. Apple is a $1 trillion company on the International Stock Exchange. Apple is registered as a company in Ireland. Apple operates in the United States of America. In the United States of America, you're not subjected to taxation unless you're registered in that jurisdiction. So Apple is registered in Ireland. Apple maintains a skeleton crew of maybe 20 people odd in Ireland. And under Irish taxation laws, your mind and management and where your substantial activity is where you are taxed, meaning in the United States. So Apple effectively registered in Ireland, not subjected to taxation, operating in the US substantially but not subjected to taxation, and therefore a $1 trillion company took advantage of a legitimate tax avoidance mechanism by an erosion of the base upon which taxation could be achieved. And Madam Speaker, this bill ensures, if you look to the schedules, and you look to Schedule 3 in particular, as to types of special economic zones and permitted activities, you look to the qualification aspects in Schedule 1 and Schedule 2, what you are looking at is a mandatory satisfaction that you have substantial economic activity, Madam Speaker. And therefore, this is intended to ensure that Trinidad and Tobago has the advantage of legitimate taxation to entities operating within those areas which are now special economic zones, whether they are operating as a landlord on the operation side of the licensing, or with a single or with a special economic license, that you have in fact of their substance. Now, this does not mean that you're not permitted the growth of the orange economy in particular, and I refer to intellectual property in that regard. When we look at the intellectual property aspect of the matter, it is very important, Madam Speaker, that we factor the important inclusions, not only of the substantial economic activity that we're looking at, but, Madam Speaker, that we look to the exceptions for this type of special economic zones as it relates to intellectual property. You'll note, Madam Speaker, that in the Senate, we included a definition for intellectual property. We lifted largely from the St. Lucian model in respect of intellectual property. But, Madam Speaker, when we watch the intellectual property aspects, we have to be sure at clause 64 to reflect upon the fact that we subject in 64 Income Tax Act to apply to the intellectual property arena. What does that mean? We are creating a springboard for the intellectual property sector, be it in digitization, in blockchain technology, in processing and backroom operations for credit card support or banking support. All of those benefits to be enjoyed in relation to income derived from an intellectual property asset shall be assessed in accordance with the provisions of the Income Tax Act. And that's in clause 64, subsection C. The other set out benefits for single economic licensees or special economic licensees in the zones, they are set out in the schedule. And they range in type and form from concessions and operations under the customs and excise regime, variations in respect of value-added tax or income tax with certain concessions applied. So, Madam Speaker, the law before us that is being offered is in a context, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, may I ask what time is full time?
Attorney General, your full time expires at 3:19.
3:19. So, Madam Speaker, the economic context of the bill is critical. This bill, Madam Speaker, you will note is being passed with a simple majority. Why, Madam Speaker? We cannot afford to let the opposition United National Congress sabotage the passing of law by bringing provisions which will require their consent. We saw what happened in the Global Forum package. We saw what happened in the Financial Action Task Force packages, in the FATCA packages. We then saw that result in the member for Mayaro coming here and unfortunately failing to tell the truth in relation to the history of the Global Forum package. where we were stranded for years in trying to pass the law in joint select committees that involved special majority laws, such that in relation to the income tax amendments in 2019 and 2020, we were compelled to carve out the simple majority provisions of the law and pass them in 2019 without the UNC's support. Madam Speaker, this law allows for simple majority passage because the issue that may tend to property considerations, which are qualified rights under Section 4 of the Constitution, or right to private life issues in Section 4 of the Constitution, those are treated with by a bifurcation. Number one, a conditionality of your license in any one of the three types of licenses is that you consent to the entry and exercise of privileges for seizure, inspection, etc. Number two, that is underwritten by the maintenance of confidentiality, and it is a crime to breach confidence. There is a privilege to ask for trade secrets, etc., to remain in a confidential zone. These are subject to audit and even to judicial scrutiny at every step of the way. So the due processing that is laid out in this law is carefully arranged to ensure that this law treats only with a simple majority prosecution for passage. Madam Speaker, may I put on record now the fact that the government has a suite of legislation which I am drafting as we speak to treat with a number of outstanding factors, some of which are directly related to the bill before us. Secondly, they are all targeting compliance with the Global Forum and with the European Union. They will involve coming back to matters which I asked the Parliament to reserve and note we would have to come back on when we were compelled in 3/5 majority consideration to agree to unreasonable conditions offered by the opposition. I marked on the note that we would go to the Global Forum, we would go to the European Union, we would seek their position on what was passed, and I can tell you now that they have instructed the government that we are to come again and seek amendments to the law that we warned about almost 2 years ago. In relation to the Global Forum, I have been in direct communication with the Global Forum at every level of the Global Forum, in one-on-one meetings and in virtual meetings on a continuous basis with their assessment entities. I have been in direct communication with the European Union and the Council, and I wish to publicly thank, Madam Speaker, the current European Union Ambassador to Trinidad and Tobago, His Excellency Peter Cavendish, for lending yeoman service to Trinidad and Tobago, for coordinating the efforts for our peer review by the Global Forum. We cannot achieve the European Union delisting from their blacklisting unless and until we satisfy the further requirements of the Financial Action Task Force as it relates to recommendations 35 and 25. That's on beneficial ownership and administrative sanctions. And you'll note in this law that we have an administrative sanctions provision in the bill. We cannot achieve EU compliance unless we achieve the base erosion profit sharing requirements. And Madam Speaker, this action item 5, which is this bill, the SEZ bill, ticks that box. We will have to deal with country by country reporting and certain tax matters, which we have already completed and which we will bring forward. And Madam Speaker, we have the Global Forum satisfaction to do, which is divided between exchange of information on request and exchange of information automatically. And those are subsetted into 23 items, where 9 of them, Madam Speaker, we can treat with in an administrative fashion. 15 of them we treat with in one piece of law on administrative function. We are awaiting the Global Forum's blessing of the particular legislation now, so that we can bring it forward, so that we can retrieve what I call the lost years brought on by the UNC government and the sabotage leveled against the people of Trinidad and Tobago in hijacking Joint Select Committee work, which was stranded for 2 sessions in this Parliament, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I will be participating at the committee stage with further details that may be addressed in this debate, and I thank you for the opportunity to contribute.
Member for Barrett-Harrison.